In this latest video looking at algebra, we're focusing on how to rearrange the formula, also known as changing the subject of a formula. Now in any formula, one variable or letter will often be the subject. So for example, in this formula here, the first one, we've got a equals pi times r squared, which is more commonly known as the area of a circle. Now in this particular formula, a is the subject. And in our second formula of F equals ma, which is one of Newton's laws, which is force equals mass times area, here we've got F is the subject. And in our third formula, which is equation of a straight line, here we've got y is the subject. And in our final formula, where we've got the circumference of a circle, which is 2 pi r, C is the subject. So in terms of understanding what do we mean by a letter being the subject, is basically making the formula equal to that variable or letter. So if you have x equals, then x is the subject. If you have y equals, y is the subject. So it's just bear in mind in that. Now if I have a formula where I've got two letters as subject, so let me, rather than writing me, let's change that and just go for g plus h equals x plus 2 divided by a, let's say, then here we could say that g plus h is the subject. But usually speaking, when you are talking about the subject, you're only talking about one variable. Generally speaking, you don't have two things or two variables or multiples of one as being the subject. And generally speaking, it's always a case of making one letter the subject. So sometimes we need to change the subject, so we need to rearrange the formula. Now how we do this is in a similar way to how we solve equations. Now in order to remove variables or numbers, we need to do the opposite and take it to the other side. Now when solving equations, we only have one variable or one letter, often x, in the equation, and at the end our final answer should always be where we have x equals, in other words making x the subject. Now the key thing to this topic is that note, and in order to be able and good at rearranging the formula, that you need to be relatively competent at solving equations. So if you're not very good at solving equations, then definitely this topic is going to be a bit of a challenge for you. So I strongly would recommend that you maybe watch or practice some questions on solving equations to gauge a proper understanding about what we are doing in this particular topic. Now before we get started on working with rearranging the formula, let's just have a quick refresh on solving equations. Now it's really important to gauge an understanding, as I previously mentioned, to gauge an understanding of this particular topic, it's always important that you are relatively competent at solving equations. Now when you are given a solving equation, you tend to find that you've only got one letter. Now often that's x, but it could literally be any other letter. Now when you have got a solving equation, your final answer needs to look like x equals. So if you're looking at question 1, it's got 3x plus 7 equals 23. So I need to work out what the value of x is going to be for this equation to be true. And my final answer should be x equals, thus making x the subject. So to do this, what I need to do is get rid of the plus 7. So it's kind of like doing reverse BIDMAS. Another way of looking at it is thinking about getting rid of what's furthest away from what you want. So here I want to make x the subject, or x by itself, so I'm going to get rid of what's furthest away. Now what's furthest away is this plus 7. So how do I get rid of plus 7? I do that by doing the opposite and taking it to the other side. So here I've got 3x equals 23 take away 7, which is going to give me 16. And then here I want to get rid of the 3. So what's the 3 doing to x? It's multiplying. So the opposite of multiplying by 3 is to divide by 3. So that 3 disappears because it's gone over to the other side and it's now doing the opposite. So what's left is x equals 16 over 3, and as 3 doesn't go in 16, I'm going to leave that as my final answer. So there we go. Now by having x equals 16 over 3, I've now made x the subject. So let's have a look at a second equation. So let's change colour of pen. So here I want to get t by itself. So in other words, I want to make t the subject. So what do I need to do? I need to get rid of all the other things that's on the same side as t. So I've got to get rid of this 4, this minus 8 and this 3. Now the thing that's furthest away from the t is going to be this 3. So I think, right, okay, let's get rid of that first. So what's this 3 doing? Well, it's dividing. So what we need to do is do the opposite, which is to multiply by 3. So here what I end up with is 4t minus 8 equals 6 times 3, which is 18. Now I want to get rid of the next thing that's furthest away from t, which is minus 8. So I do the opposite. So to get rid of minus 8, I add 8. So I get rid of that, and I've got 4t equals 18 plus 8, which is 26. And then I want to get rid of this 4. So what's the 4 doing to t? It's multiplying, so the opposite will be to divide by 4. So then that 4 disappears. And so what I'm left with is t equals 26 over 4, which I can simplify as being 13 over 2. And as it's not a nice number, I'm going to leave it as a fraction. So there is my final answer. Now moving on to our last example of looking at equations, let's quickly change colour pen. So here we've got brackets, and again I've got a single letter of x. Now I want to get x by itself. Now typically when you see brackets you think, right, okay, well let's multiply the brackets out. Now it's not essential, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two ways. So this is where I'm going to expand, and in the second method, which I would just split the page in two, I'm not going to expand. So not expand. Okay, so here, if I expand the brackets, I end up with 5x plus 10 equals minus 6. And you can see here that lo and behold, by multiplying out the brackets, what I've done is it turns into a question very, very similar to question 1. So again, the furthest thing away from x is plus 10, so the opposite would be to take away 10. So I've got 5x left on this side, and I've got minus 6 minus 10, which is minus 16. And then here I've got 5 that I need to get rid of. What's the 5 doing? It's multiplying. So the opposite would be to divide by 5. So then all I'm left with is x equals minus 16 over 5. And there is my final answer. Now if I decided not to expand the brackets, so here I've got this 5. Now what's this 5 doing to this bracket? It's multiplying. So here if I just write out the question again. So one option I could do is to get rid of this 5 and take it to the side. So I'm going to divide by 5. So here what I've got is I've got x plus 2 equals minus 6 divided by 5. Now from this, what I've now got to do is still haven't got x by itself, which is what I need to do. So I need to get rid of this plus 2. So how do I get rid of plus 2? I take away 2. So what I'm left with is x equals minus 6 over 5 minus 2. Now you might think to yourself, well, have we got the same answers? Well, let's have a look. If I typed in minus 16 over 5 on my calculator, then what I end up with is as a decimal of minus 3.2. If I do minus 6/5 take away 2, I'm also going to get the same answer of minus 3.2. So even though the answers look different, so for example here I've got minus 16 over 5, and here in this particular way of not expand the brackets I've got minus 6 over 5 minus 2. They both give me the exact same answer, and this is something that you definitely need to take forward when dealing with rearranging the formula, is that sometimes your answer could look completely different to something else or the person next to you or what your teacher has done. However, it still may be correct, so it's always worth just double checking by working out the answers or substituting numbers into the formula to see if it does give you the same answer. So let's have a look at actually doing some basic rearranging. So looking at these questions, so looking at question 1, now in this particular question formula I've got, I don't know what's going on there, let's move that back up. So in example 1 I've got m as the subject, but I don't want m as the subject, I don't want m equals, I want x equals. So looking at what's on the same side as x is t, so I want to get rid of that t. So what's the t doing to x? Well, if there's no symbol in between the letters, so there's no add, there's no subtraction, there's no divide or like a slash to represent a division or a fraction, then it's basically always multiplying. So here t is multiplied by x, so the opposite of multiplying by t is to divide by t. So what I'm left with is x equals m divided by t. Now one of the rules of algebra is that we don't use the division symbol, instead we use fractions instead. So a proper way of writing this answer would be m over t, and there is my final answer. However, if you were to get this as an exam, if you were to write m divided by t, as long as there's no other letters or no other numbers involved, then that still would also be correct. So let's have a look at question 2. So here we've got a formula of x plus 7 equals r. So r is the subject, but I want to make x the subject. So I want to get x by itself, so what I need to get rid of is this plus 7. So what's the opposite of adding 7? Taking away 7. So looking at that then, what I've got left is x equals, and it's going to be r minus 7, and there is my final answer. Now the key thing to note is that r minus 7 is not the same as 7 minus r. So it's really important that when you're subtracting and dividing, that you take extra care in what needs to come first and what needs to come second, because it will have an impact on your final answer. So looking at question 3, so here I've got y the subject. So even though the sides have switched, it doesn't really make a difference. If you're happy to write it, you can write it as x minus h equals y. That's entirely up to you, but I'm going to keep it as it is because I can't bother with faff. So here I want to make x equals. I want to make x the subject, but again, I've got this minus h to get rid of. So what's the opposite of subtracting h? Well, it's going to be adding h. So what have I got left on this left-hand side? Well, I've got y plus h equals x, and now I've got y, x equals by itself. That there is my final answer. And again, if I wanted to, I could write that as x equals y plus h. Again, there is my final answer. So looking at question 4, I've got the formula of x over y equals gh. Now again, as I said, more often than not, most formulas will only have one letter, the subject. In this, gh is the subject. So here, don't be too bothered about the gh. You can just treat that as one number. So I want to get rid of this y. So what's the y doing to x? Well, it's dividing. So the opposite of dividing by y is to multiply by y. So what I've got is I've got x equals, and I'm going to have gh times x. Now, obviously, with rules of algebra is that we don't use the multiplication symbol. Instead, all we do is we join the two things together. I've realised I've used x when that really should be y, so let's just quickly change that. So there we go. So just going over that again, so the opposite of dividing by y is to multiply y. So here on the right hand side I'm going to have gh, which is already there, times y. Now I don't use the multiplication symbol, instead I just join the letters together. So what my final answer for this will look like is x equals gh y, and there's my final answer. Now more often than not, you tend to write letters in alphabetical order. So when let's just write a little note. So when multiplying letters together, we write them in alphabetical order. Now it's not essential, but very good practice. You tend to find that it usually if you're going to have letters, when you're multiplying, you generally write the letters in alphabetical order. So for example, ABC, although it is the same as CAB, again, it's just a case of just making sure that trying to write the letters in alphabetical order, but if you don't, it should still be the correct answer and you should get marked correctly, even if you didn't write them in alphabetical order. So let's have a look at some more complicated examples. So here we've got in question 5, let's use a different colour pen. So here I've got gx plus e equals f. So there's two things I need to get rid of in this particular equation to get x by itself. So what do I need to get? So the question you need to ask yourself, do I get rid of the g first or the e? Now as mentioned when solving equations, is think to yourself, well okay, if this was if g and e were and f were numbers, so I had 3x plus 2 equals 8, and I've just made those numbers up, what would you get rid of first? Would you get rid of the plus 2 or would you get rid of the 3? Hopefully you're going to say the right answer, which is going to be the plus 2. So in this, what we're going to do is get rid of the e first. So how do we get rid of that e? Well, what's the e doing? It's adding. So to get rid of it, we need to do the opposite. So I'm going to subtract e. So what I'm left with is gx equals f minus e. Now here I need to get rid of this g. So what's the g doing? It's multiplying. So the opposite would be to divide by g. Now this is where you just need to be careful of how you're presenting your final answer. Now x equals, now the problem is that more often than not, an incorrect answer would be f minus e divided by g, which although sounds correct, and it is in some aspects, but because of BIDMAS, this would not be marked correctly. Why? Because looking at this, only the e is being divided by g, and we need to divide everything by g. So if I wrote brackets around that, then that would be correct, but a more preferred way of writing this would be x equals f minus e, or divided by g. And so writing it as a fraction just becomes that little bit easier. So from this stage here, I would go straight to this stage here. So when you're dividing, just put a line through it, not a line through it, line underneath it, and then write whatever you're dividing by underneath, and that would be absolutely fine. So let's have a look at our next question. So question 6. Now here we've got AB and what that we need to get rid of. Now what's AB doing? Well, they're both multiplying by x. Now one thing that you can do when rearranging this is treating AB, because they're both doing the same thing, we can treat it as one thing. So rather than looking at this as two variables, I'm going to treat it as one. So here, what's the opposite of multiplying by AB? Well, that would be to divide by AB. So what will this look like? It will look like x equals and then p. So rather than writing division symbol, I'm going to write it as a fraction and then write AB underneath, and there is my final answer. Looking on to question 7. So here we've got 2hx equals r minus t. Now again, I'm going to need to get rid of the 2h. So I'm going to treat that as one thing. And what's 2h doing to x? It's multiplying, so the opposite would be to divide by 2h. So what have I got? Well, I've got x equals, because I'm still got the left on the left hand side, and then I've got r minus t all divided by 2h, and there is my final answer. And then looking at question 8, so again here I need to get rid of the 2, I need to get rid of 3rt. So I'm going to treat the rt as one term, one letter. Okay, so let's just get rid of that bracket. So I'm going to treat it as one thing. So what I've got to do is ask myself, what's the opposite of adding 3rt? Well, it's going to be to take away 3rt. So then what have I got left on the left hand side is 2x equals h plus g minus 3rt. Now you might be thinking, do you know what, this is looking ridiculously messy, I don't like it, it's looking more complicated than what it actually is. And the reason for that is because when you're dealing with numbers, you can actually work it out to make it easier for you to see. So for example, you wouldn't write 3 times 4 plus let's say 6, because what you'd do is you'd work out 3 times 4, which is 12, add 6. So rather than writing all of this, instead you would just write 18. But when you've got letters, you don't know the values, so unfortunately nothing disappears, and that's something that makes this topic particularly confusing. Now I still haven't finished because I need to get x by itself, so I need to get rid of this 2. So what's the 2 doing? It's multiplying, so the opposite would be to divide by 2. So what I'm left with is x equals h plus g minus 3rt, all divided by 2, and there is my final answer. So let's just look at 3 last examples. So for this one here, we've got brackets. So again, it's entirely up to you whether to expand the brackets or not. Now, personally speaking, I would say that your final answer will generally look a lot nicer if you do expand the brackets, but it's not essential. So here I want to get x by itself. So I've got to get rid of the a, the b, and the c. So if I expand the brackets out, what I end up with is abx plus ac equals de. Now again here I'm going to get rid of the AC first. So the opposite of adding AC is to take away AC. So what I'm left with is ABX equals DE minus AC. Now I still need to get rid of this AB. So what's the AB doing? It's multiplying, so the opposite would be to divide by AB. So what I'm left with is X equals DE minus AC, all divided by AB, and there is my final answer. Now looking at question 10, I'm going to use a different colour because I think the red's just a bit too dark. So here I want to try and get x by itself. So I need to get rid of this a, I need to get rid of this ft. Now what's further away? Well, the a is further away, so that's what I'm going to get rid of. So what's this a doing? It's dividing. So the opposite of dividing by a is to multiply by a. So what I'm left with is ft plus x equals a ty. Now if you want to write tya, that's absolutely fine, but again I'm just keeping it alphabetical order just to keep it so. Now here I want to get rid of the ft. So what's the ft doing? Well, it's adding, so the opposite of adding ft will be to take away ft. So what I'm left with is x equals a ty minus ft, and there is my final answer. Then finally moving on to question 11. Now this one involves a square root. So again, I want to get x by itself, so I need to get rid of this, I need to get rid of the a, I need to get rid of the b, and I need to get rid of this square root as well. Now the square root is something that I need to get rid of, so you think to yourself, okay, what's the opposite of square rooting? Well, it's going to be squaring. So what we've got here is I've got ax plus b equals y squared, and then I want to get rid of the a and the b, so what's further away from x? Well, the plus b. So what's the opposite of adding b? Taking away b, so I've got ax equals, and then just get rid of that, so we've got y squared minus b, and then I need to get rid of this a. What's the a doing to x? It's multiplying, so the opposite will be to divide by a. So here what I've got left is x equals y squared minus b, and because it's all been divided by a, there is my final answer. And there we go. Now we'll put some practice questions in the description below for you to have a go at most of the things that we've covered in this video, and I'll also include the answers for you to check to make sure you're getting them correct.